Launching into what we're going to talk about this morning, which is how you view your stuff. How you view your stuff. How important is stuff in your life? Michelle and I have been very, very blessed, and I mean this with all my heart, to be able to give and to help other people out throughout our life. And I want to say to you, as a way of explanation before I tell the story I'm going to tell you, because this is important, I think, to lay this groundwork, that we were both raised in a home of pastors, and so we were taught early to give and to serve. And, I didn't know that you could not, I didn't know you could go to church and not do something. I did not know that. I didn't know you could just go and sit and listen to a service. I'd never been taught that way. From the moment that, we were old enough to walk through the building, we had to do something. We were given some responsibility. I can remember my sister, she was very young, probably about 3 years old, and my dad gave her the job one Sunday morning. She said, "You help the greeters." And so I was watching her. I was doing some other stuff that I was required to do each morning, and they would walk through the door, and she would stick her hand out and go, and they would reach the hand down, way down, to shake her hand, and she would say, "I appreciate you." And so we were raised that way, Michelle and I, and so, that was natural to us, that you're supposed to give. And when I had my first job, I was 11 years old, and I took a job as a paper route guy, and I would collect money, and I knew what I owed for the paper to pay them, and then I knew what I got to keep, and my dad was looking over my shoulder to make sure I would take the tithe out. It was $12, and it's $1.20 that I owed in tithe, and we were just taught, that we were to give, that we were to be generous, that we were to be grateful, and we were to serve. And I really thank God for that upbringing in both of our lives, because when Michelle and I started out in marriage, we started out, not wealthy. We started out, making very little. In fact, if I recall, in the first year of our marriage, I think that once we paid our bills, we had $20 that we would split between us, $10 for her and $10 for me, that just wasn't designated fund, right? And so, we had that for we could Coke money, buy a Coke or buy, a sandwich or something. And once that was gone, that was gone. And so that was kind of the way things started out for us. But we were very much givers then, as much as later when God blessed our lives and we had some abundance to give out of. It was a joy to be able to give, and I really believe that if we hadn't given when we didn't have it, and when we had a lot less, I guess I might say it that way, that we probably wouldn't have been giving when we had a lot more, a big abundance. And I want to lay that foundation for you, not to pat us on the back or to say how great we are or anything along that line, but to tell you, to set you up for a story that happened to us when we went to Las Vegas. Now, we happened to come to Las Vegas and get on, I was invited on staff, one of 11 pastors, I wasn't the senior pastor, in a mega church. The church was about 3,300 when we came there, and over the next 3 years or so grew to about 6,000 people. And so we were adding services. Now our service was the Saturday night. We chose to go on Saturday night, bring the whole family. But obviously I was there on Sunday as well, serving and helping, and all through the week. I had responsibilities with the church. And it was a joy to serve there. We really loved it. But we happened to be there during the season when the hurricane hit in New Orleans and Katrina hit, and there was such devastation. And so one of the wonderful things about being in a mega church situation is you have a lot of resources. You have a lot of manpower. You have a lot of finance together combined that can accomplish and do some great things. And so not only did we send out some strategic teams to New Orleans to serve and to help and to minister and to give food and clothing and all this kind of stuff, but we identified people while there that wanted to come back to Vegas and get a fresh start, a new start. Their lives had been washed out there, and they wanted to get a fresh start. And so adopting families took these families that were identified in and took over, and they of course, couldn't take care of the whole situation themselves. They started building teams. Now, we had some very good friends that were adopting family of a family of 9 coming from New Orleans, and they had invited us to be part of the blessing and participate. We were so excited. We immediately identified what we would like to do and prayed about it, and we felt that God gave us a number financially that we were to give. Michelle was excited because she was working at a retail, as a manager, and she was in a large outlet mall. She had a lot of relationship, felt like I can get some of these young adults jobs. If they can work for me, they can work for some of these other places, we can immediately put them to work. So the adopting family was excited about that. And then we told them, we said, what we'd like you to do is we want you to, when we meet this family, we want you to invite them to a really nice place. And we talked about it, they decided on a location. We want to pay for everybody's food. And we want to hear their story. And we want to pray with them. We want to encourage them, find out how we can minister to them. And we're going to pick up the bill for all of the people, including the adopting family. We want to take care of this. This is what God is asking us to do. We want to do that. And then we want to give them a special offering. Well, we were excited. The day arrived. We got a chance to meet the family. We met them first, I think, at church. And then afterwards we went out and went to the restaurant. And as the evening began to unfold, we started seeing some things that were disheartening, and that was that we really started seeing that this group of people, this family, was very ungrateful. And they were not talking at all about the blessings that brought them there and all of the things that the adopting family had done, but they were talking a lot about how that this 5-star hotel that they were put up in, they just couldn't get good service there, and the food wasn't great, and they had heard that the people down the street had a different hotel and that food was better there and accommodations were better there. They were talking about, if we just had transportation, we could get around, though they did not have any transportation, no cars or anything when they were in New Orleans. Now, if they just had some transportation, things would be much better here. Michelle began to talk to some of the young people about getting a job. So, we just really don't have a car. So, there's no problem. There's a shuttle. It picks up right here at the hotel and runs back and forth day and night, from the outlet mall to here, and you would be able to get a ride for free. But as this thing began to unfold, you began to see, there's just no gratitude here. There's just a very much a lack of gratitude, and we were not going to be able to help. We fulfilled what we believed God called us to do. We paid for the meal. We offered the jobs to the young people, and then we left them with a financial offering. They did not take us up on the jobs, and very little thanks of any kind for the things that were going on, not only with us, but with the adopting family. How does that happen? How is there a lack of gratitude in our hearts and life? Last week, we talked about something very, very important, and the takeaway we wanted you to have from our time together last week was that our gratitude shows that our circumstances do not rule the day, our God rules the day. When we express gratitude, no matter what we've been through, no matter what kind of challenges we've been through, no matter what crisis happens in our life, our gratitude shows the world that we are those people who serve a God who is really in charge of the circumstances and the situation, and we trust Him, and He's going to bring us through. This week, the takeaway for us is going to be the passage that Zach read earlier for us, just the last section there, Luke chapter 12, verse 15. One's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. One's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. There are really two spirits that can cause our attitude to be one of greed instead of gratitude. And these two spirits work to try to drive us to greed rather than to a spirit of gratitude. The first one is the spirit of pride, and the second one is the spirit of poverty. Now, in the instance of the story I was telling you a moment ago, it was really about pride. Because pride tries to get us to think more about our stuff than we ought to think. Pride tries to get us to value stuff in ways that we should not value it. Pride tries to make us think that stuff is the answer to our situation and our circumstance. And that if we only had more stuff, we'd have a better identity and we would have a better life. On the other side of it is the poverty mentality, and poverty can be just as evil. It's on the opposite side of the spectrum, but it's when, we feel a guilt about what we do have, and we feel a shame over what the stuff that we have in life, and we try to hide it. And I've experienced that. I told the story last night about, God's really, at different times, really blessed us, and we've had abundance, and then we've gone through times where it's been difficult and challenging. Our first couple of years here in Austin, was really difficult, was really, really challenging for us financially and in many, many ways. But we've also had those great abundance times where God's really blessed us. I was telling the story last night about how my brother-in-law, on one occasion, he gave me a Rolex watch. Nothing I had ever dreamt about or spent much time thinking about, but I was certainly honored and grateful that he would think about giving that to me. But then I found myself ashamed to put it on, because I thought, what are people going to think about a pastor who wears a Rolex watch? And then you hear the disciples kind of talking in the background saying, this could have been sold and the money given to the poor. And so really, this can be really as evil of a side as the pride side, where we are just wounded and we think that if we show that we have something that in some way is a bad thing. And so really, when you think about it, if you want to know how we think about stuff really determines whether we have a heart of gratitude or not. And that's why it's so important how we view the stuff in our life. In fact, there are 3 ways that God wants us to view our stuff so that we can have a healthy attitude, an attitude of gratitude. And the Bible tells us there are 3 ways that God would have us to view our stuff. I'm going to tell you the first one. The first one is that our stuff is just stuff. Our stuff is just stuff, right? God has no problem with you having stuff. What he has a problem with is when stuff has you. That's what he has a problem with. When you have to give up serving him because you have to wash the boat. Or you have to give up, doing what he's asked you to do because you have to polish the car. The stuff doesn't bother God as long as the stuff doesn't have you. God is a jealous God, and he will not share you with anyone or with anything. You belong to him. Luke, that Zach read a moment ago, I want to read through this passage again. Luke chapter 12, verse 13 through 15. Then one from the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist of the abundance of the things that he possesses." Now, if you were here a couple of months ago when Dr. Jeff Magruder came and was talking to us about covetousness, you may remember that he said, that's something that we consider kind of very benign. We don't think that's a huge offense. No one has ever heard, someone say, pastor caught in the act of covetousness and arrested. News at 11. You remember he was telling us about that? It just doesn't seem like a huge thing. But God recognizes that it's idolatry. And he recognizes that when we get our stuff raised up to some kind of a value above him, it's going to get our attention and it's going to get our worship. Now, the last statement that Jesus said there is so important for us. It becomes our takeaway for today. For one's life does not consist of the abundance of things that he possesses. Your life does not consist of the accumulation of things that you have. Do not look at the things that you have, say, right now I'm 30 and I don't have this and I don't have that, therefore I have no value. Do not do it. Your life does not consist of the things you have or the things you don't have. Your life is unique. God created you. He loved you, and you are of the greatest of value. You're more valuable than your stuff. And I want to tell you something. As a pastor, one of the things we get to do, which I really don't like to do, if I didn't have to do, I wouldn't do, but they are funerals. And I've done a number of them, hundreds of them, and I have never once seen a U-Haul at the funeral site, at the gravesite, because you cannot take it with you. Your stuff doesn't get to go, right? God values you, and you need to understand how important you are. Now, if you want to make room for gratitude, you do it by giving away what you have. You don't put such value on things. You say, this can never depart from me because it's so important. You recognize if God wants this, he can have it. And so on the bottom of everything that you get, whether it's a car, a home, whatever it is, you sign the name of Jesus and not your name. Because you are a steward, you're just taking care of stuff. You don't get to take it into eternity. The good news is God is preparing a place for you. He said, I'm going away and I'm going to make a place for you in my Father's house or many mansions. I'll take care of all of that. Right now, this is for you to use while you're on earth during time. But in eternity, I've taken care of everything. Don't worry about it. Isn't that going to be great? Your life is not summed up by your stuff. Nick's going to come and talk to us about point number 2 on this.
So your number 2 is your stuff is just a test. God sometimes gives you things and gives you stuff just to see how you're going to respond and how you're going to use that stuff that's around you. He puts that stuff in your life as a test to see where you're going to look for your provisions. And did you know that God's not only concerned with what you do with your stuff, but he's also really concerned about how you see other people's stuff. In Deuteronomy 5:21 it says, "You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, and you shall not desire your neighbor's house, his field, his male servant, his female servant, his ox, his donkey, or anything else that is your neighbor's." So I know what you guys are thinking. I don't have an ox. My neighbor doesn't have an ox. My neighbor doesn't have a donkey, a male servant or a female servant, so I'm good. But he does have some really nice jet skis. And God doesn't say anything about jet skis. But if you read it carefully, this is another thing we learned from Dr. Jeff Magruder, is he said that, God has a way of handling and bulletproofing the statements that he makes in the Bible. He makes sure that everything is future-proof. And he says, at the end, it says, or anything else that is your neighbor's. Right? So when God says anything in the Bible, what do you think he means? Anything. It's not just the things that he listed here specifically. He's talking about shoes, he's talking about clothes, he's talking about money, he's talking about everything that's part of that as well. A desire for stuff really bothers God because it actually takes away and takes your focus off of him and puts it on that stuff that you're desiring. And it's really, really easy to start changing the way that you really interact with people, the way that you do things with people, the way that you see people. It's really, really easy to start insulting somebody when they have something that you really, really want or you really think you need. It becomes easy to bring other people's down because of the stuff that you think you need but you really don't have. So you start really kind of bringing people down and saying, man, that person has something really cool. It's because, they just go around in brown nose all the time and they have a great job and that's why they have that stuff. Or, they have, their parents really worked really hard and now he's just reaping the benefits and, that's just that one person. So it starts bringing all this negativity inside of you. All this stuff starts really kind of changing your demeanor, and instead of being happy for somebody for the things that you have, you start looking for different excuses to bring them down. If you're focused on the stuff, it takes your eyes off of what God really has already set in front of you. When you put your eyes on getting the next prize, it takes your eyes off the one and only prize, the ultimate prize. Yes. So I've had really, really hard times in my life. Growing up, I grew up in a single-parent household. My mom worked really, really hard, and she gave us everything that we absolutely needed. I really wasn't one of those people that had really nice stuff. Didn't have, nice gaming system or nice shoes or anything like that. But I always had what I needed. I always had a meal to eat. I always had a roof over my head and everything like that. And I think that really kind of changed my way of thinking growing up. I really didn't see a lot of the things that other people had and said, man, I really want that. What can I do to have that? Why can't I have nice things like that? Because I saw the way that my mom really worked hard for the things that we had in our life. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older where I had the means of acquiring the things that I wanted. And God really kind of put things into my life that I had. I had a vehicle, I had everything like that. And, I up until recently, I had a truck that I almost had paid off, and I was really excited about it. And everything just started going. It feels like everything on that truck that could have broken, broke. And everything happened for a really short period of time, and really fast I was out of a vehicle. So a couple $1,000s later, it wasn't running yet, so it was time to take her to the glue factory. So that's what ended up happening, and I didn't have a vehicle anymore. So I was like, well, I can do things, and I can find a way to make up for this and figure out a way that I can really, find a way to get to work and everything like that. And this was really a part of my life where I could really start blaming other people and looking at other people and saying, man, I don't know. I go to church all the time. I help at church. I, spend time there. I do things that I don't really need to, but I want to do. Why don't I get to get a car that works? Why don't I have, the opportunity to get a new vehicle pretty quickly? Why didn't my truck start working when I put all that money into it? Why are all these people have the things that I really deserve? But if I would have started focusing my attention on the negativity in life, and it was, I'm not going to say I didn't, because if I did, I'd be lying, right? Because there was certain times where I felt like it was one thing after another. But my ability to just trust and see the things that God had provided for me kind of trumped the things that I didn't have. I felt like, Vanessa actually went out of town, and she was like, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to leave my car at Michael and Tanya's house. If you want to go pick it up, you can use it while I'm gone. Just go pick me up from the airport. And I was like, cool. And I think that very same day, Nancy had already said, I said, well, hey, I'm going to go out of town. If you want to use my car, you can just go pick it up, whatever, the keys are there. So all of a sudden, I had more cars than I did before. And there was a lot of things, I had Amanda was able to take me to work on a lot of occasions. Everybody that I felt like anybody said, hey, if you need a ride somewhere, if you need something to do, hey, if you need help, I can help you, buy a car, or hey, if you want to go do this, I can, help you get a deal. I felt like everybody was overwhelmingly, helpful. And it's a really good thing to kind of that happened, because it really helped me take my eyes off of the things that I didn't have and put my eyes on the things that I really did have, and the things that God had already provided, the people that God had put in my life to assist me when things like this happened. God wants you to have the ultimate prize. The stuff is just some of the building material that's laid on the path in front of you. And what we have to remember is that we just need to make sure that we stay on the right path. And that's our path, the thing that God has already given us the building materials for, the things that God has already provided for. We need to stay on the right path so that we can move forward. So remember, guys, the stuff is just a test. The stuff is sometimes just sometimes you get stuff just to see what you can do with it. And sometimes God takes that stuff away to see what you will do without that stuff as well. So Pastor Allen's going to come back and share the last point with us and how God wants us to view our stuff.
Gratitude is passing the stuff test. It comes out of being able to pass the stuff test. Can we really pass the stuff test? 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 11 says, you will be made rich in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. Your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. God uses the test of our stuff to see how grateful we'll be. One of the, there are many people in the faith who I look up to that I think people of note that we know and have seen on TV, read books after, but also just common individuals that I have had a relationship with who live for God and I really look up to. They're great people. One of those that I really looked up to in this particular area is Rick Warren. Now, Rick Warren wrote the Purpose-Driven Life book, and it had circulation all over the planet, and he became a millionaire overnight by writing this book. Now, his attitude about it was this book could have been written by anyone, I believe that God selected and chose us because he knew what we would do with the resources that came our way. One of the very first things, and I mean the first thing that Rick Warren did once he found out this book was greatly successful and there was going to be a lot of money coming his way, was he started Saddleback Church in California and in Southern California, and he started it in his home actually, and it grew and it's become more 15,000 member church, maybe 20,000 member church, and there are sub churches of that all over, not only just in America but also across the world. And one of the things Rick Warren did was he went and sat down with his accounting team and he said, I want you to calculate, I think at that point about 25 years, everything that was paid to me as a pastor. It probably was very little when the thing first started and was in his own home, and as the church grew, he became a regular salaried staff member. And he said, I want you to find out what that number is all those 25 years. And they came back to him after a week or so of doing the investigation. They said, here's the best we can come up with, the number of what it was paid to you over 25 years of ministry. And Rick Warren sat down and wrote a check to Saddleback Church in that amount and gave it back to the church. And he said, it was the greatest day of my life, the most freeing thing when I said to them, I'm off a salary, I've paid everything back, I am doing this for free. I've always wanted to do the work of the Lord for free. And he said, I just want to give more than I ever have taken it back. And God had blessed that so tremendously, had blessed the their ministry there. And as a result of that, he and Kay, his wife, now are giving 90% of all of their income back into ministry. And what's so really powerful about it, even beyond that, I think, was that he didn't move into a bigger, fancy, nicer home. He didn't buy a big, fancy cars. They recently added a little addition onto the home that they've lived in ever since they've been in the Saddleback area. And it's just amazing when you see people that really understand how to be grateful and live a life of gratitude. We read in Deuteronomy chapter 8 that God took the children of Israel through some experiences in the wilderness to humble them, but also to test them as he tests us. And he said in verses 11 through 18, God tells them that when they reach the promised land, he really wants them to remember, and that's going to help them with their gratitude. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 18, let's read it there. It says, and you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the power to get wealth, and he may establish his covenant, which he swore to your fathers, as is this day. The gratitude was going to flow as a result of them passing the stuff test, remembering who they were before God, remembering what God had done in their life and where they were right now. They understood that the stuff that they had was not the sum of who they were. The things that they had didn't possess them, but they possessed those in order to be a blessing and to share with other people. The key to walking in gratitude for us is remembering where God has brought us, how he rescued us and saved us. And we're going to come to the Lord's table this morning in a little bit. And as we do that, we're going to remember what our life was like before we met Jesus and what our life has been like since we've met him. Now, it's not all roses being a Christian, right? You've still gone through some trials and difficulties. The difference is Jesus goes with you. And before I knew Jesus, I went through it alone, and all of the stress and the pressure, had to solve it and resolve it in my own life. But now that you know Jesus, he goes with you every step of the way. An attitude of gratitude for us can be very simple. Now, there are 4 things that I want you to begin to put into action this week, all right? The first thing is I want us to deal with a selfish heart, which arises before giving. A selfish heart always arises before giving. It's us saying, I really can't do that, because it's gonna, it's gonna take a chunk. I don't see, it's not there. It's not, in my checkbook account or on my online banking or whatever it is. We need to deal with that selfish heart. And giving is not just about our finances and stuff, but it's using our gifts, our talents to serve others, to help others. It's all those things included. And we need to be givers. And so first we're going to have to deal with that selfish heart. The second thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to have to deal with a grieving heart. And that comes after you give. In the retail world, they call that buyer's remorse. Anybody ever had buyer's remorse? You know, they buy it on Sunday and they bring it back on Monday, right? Because they start to feel like they've spent too much money. And the enemy works that way, though, in our lives. You shouldn't have done that, you know. You should have gotten some change when they passed the offering plate. You know what I'm saying? And the enemy is like that. He's working us over after the fact. He doesn't just quit once you go ahead and obey God and give. So we have to deal with the grieving part of it afterwards. And then third, I want you to develop a generous heart, which gives freely and gives joyfully. That is going to take some work on all of our parts. It's there because we were created by God, and the DNA of who we are, it's there in our relationship with Jesus Christ. It's all there. We need to recall it and bring it forth, but we have to begin to practice it. That we are giving generously, we're giving joyfully. Learning to say yes, learning to help and to serve. Don't say yes to everything. Something we need to say no to. But we need to be able to be joyful givers. And I want to tell you, when you get into this level, when you start doing this, it is such a blessing. Michelle and I we were sitting in our living room. It's going back to Vegas. We're sitting in our living room and a family of 4 is over there. And it was a Saturday night. We were there to bless people, to encourage them, to help them. It was after the service, and this is kind of our follow-up on after service. These people were Christians. And everyone left but this family, and we're talking to them, and something struck them, and the wife began to cry. And they opened up to us and told us the true story. Husband had lost his job, wife has lost her job. They had no savings, and they had some looming things coming up. And while they're crying, Michelle and I are smiling because just like a couple of days ago, Michelle said, remember when we put this money away back in the closet and it was all cash? And she said, we forgot about it, and it was just sitting there. And, she said she had just told me, like I think a couple of days before. Remember that? It's still there. All those $100 bills just sitting there that we stuck away. We're thinking we're going to use it for this or that or something else, and we forgot about it. It's literally been there for 8 or 9 months, and we just forgot that it was even there. And she said it's still there. And so immediately we were thinking, what do we need? Do we need a new couch? We need a new TV? And then here we are Saturday sitting with this family, and they begin to pour their hearts out. And we say, you know what? We need to help a family. And so while they're crying, we're smiling. And I know they thought we were crazy. And Michelle goes back to the closet and comes back with that money. And she looks at me. She doesn't even have to ask. And I'm like, take it to them. And she walks right over and hands them these $100 bills. And the crying is all around. All of us are crying. You need to be a joyful giver. You're going to love it. And God loves those who have a joyful giving heart. And you can never outgive God. I mean, He takes care of you. He will always take care of you. The fourth thing you need to do is develop a grateful heart, which acknowledges that God is the source and the provider. Now, we have passed out these wonderful blessing jars. We started last week. Some of you are here this week. You didn't get one last week because you were MIA, so we have one for you, okay? And Vanessa will take care of you. She'll make sure that you get one of these blessing jars. Now, how do I know that this is a blessing jar and not just a mason jar? Well, because it has a sticker on it that says it's a blessing jar, right? So what we do with this blessing jar, what we're asking you to do is over the next 3 weeks, we started last week, this week, and next week, is to write on a slip of paper. And Amanda's even printed out some paper back there. So when you pick up your blessing jar, there are strips of paper. We want you to write your blessings on there. Just as often as you think about it throughout the day, and stuff them down inside of this blessing jar, okay? And then at Thanksgiving, we want you to take this out, and you're going to open it up, and you're going to pass it around the table. And everyone's going to pull out a piece of paper, one of the blessings, and they're going to read it. Now, if there's an explanation needed, you can explain it and tell the story. Because you may pull one out of there that's not yours, and you don't really understand what it means. Somebody at the table does, and they're going to be able to tell the story about the blessing of God in their life, okay? So we want everybody to take home a blessing jar, because this is going to help us develop a grateful heart, just counting the blessings in our life. God wants you to pass the blessing test. You remember in the Bible, God was talking to them about, throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, the principle of first is what I call it. He said that everything that was first belongs to him. The firstborn lambs and the firstborn cattle, they belong to God. He said that the firstborn, first fruits was one of the language for the farmers, those who grew wheat and apples and whatever else. He said, the very first harvest that you get, bring it to me. That's mine. Bring it into the storehouse. The first of everything belongs to me. When they went into the promised land, the land that God had given them, he said, you're going to conquer Jericho. I am literally going to crush the walls. You're just going to march around. You're not even going to have to fight. You're not going to break a sweat because Jericho doesn't belong to you. It's mine. Everything in Jericho is mine. I just want you to walk around, worship me, and praise me. I'm going to crush the walls and crush the people. And you're going to walk in. The plunder will be there. It belongs to me. Bring it into my house. It's mine. And then from that point forward, I'm going to take care of you. Now, one of the people that was in the army, you may remember, he didn't listen, and he hoarded up some things from that great victory at Jericho, and it caused a great defeat in the next battle of a very small town called Ai. And so they learned a lesson that is first belongs to God. It's a principle of first. Here's what happens when you and I practice the principle of first. When God is first in our lives, others are going to see it, our checkbook will record it, and our decisions will confirm it. Others are going to see it when God is first. Our checkbook's going to record it, and the results of our decisions are going to confirm it to people. Here's our test to see if we're passing the stuff test, okay? It is found in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Are you passing the stuff test? Adam and Eve walk into the garden, and God says, created all this for you. It is yours. Every tree here that brings forth fruit, these apricots, apples, pomegranates, everything that brings forth fruit here belongs to you. Wait a minute, though. There's one tree among the millions that I've planted here that belongs to me. Don't touch it. What's the first thing that happens? The enemy comes up and says, God doesn't love you. He has one tree he didn't give to you. He despises you. Look at that one tree that God kept for himself. The principle of first. You should have that too. That's what the enemy does with our stuff. You don't have, always focusing on what we don't have, on what we haven't accumulated. And one of my challenges for you is to go back over the last 6 months. Take a look at your online banking and see, just put it on a spreadsheet of some kind and see where all the money's going. Because the Bible tells us that wherever our money goes, our heart is following really close. It's right there. And so if we calculate it out and it's all restaurant bills and food and stuff like that, all right. If we calculate it out and it's all the new cars and the payments and or it's heavy on the too heavy on the house and other kinds of things, and we recognize that maybe it's Visa, MasterCard, JCPenney is getting a big chunk, and we realize then that our hearts are going after something other than what God really wants them to pursue. When we take a look at the record of what's happening in our lives, we're going to get a good look at where our passions and our purposes and our desires and our love really is. Is God really first in our life? Are we passing the stuff test? Is our stuff just stuff? Could we give it away if Jesus asked? On one occasion he asked a rich man, he said, go sell all you have and give it to the poor, and then take up your cross and follow me. Could we do that? Could we lose it all and start over again if God required it or asked us of it? We told our children when they were very young, I'm inviting the worship team, from our very first home that we moved into that was going to be ours. You can't eat in your bedroom. You can't drink in your bedroom. You can't take any food outside of this kitchen area right here. And the reason why is because we are stewards of this house that we are living in right now. We're not owners. We're going to sell this house one day and we're going to give it to another family and they're going to be stewards of it. But it will never, ever just belong to us. And it is God's house. While we have it, we're going to welcome everybody in. We're going to have them enjoy life here and enjoy family and find God here. Our house is an open door to anyone who needs it. This belongs to God, and we are stewards of it while we're here on the earth. And every house we moved into, they knew not to do that. And they put that into practice. And so when we left our homes and we pulled up the beds and folded them up, stuff like that, there wasn't any Kool-Aid stains to clean up. There wasn't any graham crackers to vacuum. There was none of that because no food was allowed outside of the kitchen. None. Is our stuff in charge of us, or are we stewarding our stuff? Let's stand together and worship the Lord. And then Michelle's going to come help us with the communion aspect.